stations are tuned in too.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any materials produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Paranormal Buzz Radio is proud to present Girls vs. Ghosts, The Realm Walker with Kelly McCarville, live, only on Spreaker. Every Wednesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 Central, 6 Pacific. And as always, join us in our live interactive chat by going to Spreaker.com or downloading the Spreaker app for your devices. Kelly is a respected paranormal investigator and also a very gifted medium and brings a unique perspective into the paranormal field. Be sure to follow Kelly on all her social media at Facebook, Kelly McCarville Moonspinner, Instagram and Twitter at Moonspinner76, and on the web at mysticalmoonspinner.com.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Realm Walker.
Hello, everybody. Happy Wednesday evening, and thank you for tuning in. I know that tonight is a busy night for a lot of people, so I appreciate you guys being here and joining us for this awesome show. I am very excited to have our guest on tonight. This lovely lady is somebody that I have known for many, many years, and I've learned a lot from her over the years, and I've thought, since I started doing shows, I need to get her on here to talk about this topic, and it just all kind of fell together to bring her on. So it is my pleasure to welcome Wiccan High Priestess Shannon Webber to the show. Hey, Shannon, how you doing?
Thank you, Kelly. I'm really excited. I've never done anything like this.
I've thought about it for the longest time. I'm like, I need to get Shannon on here so we can talk about this, because I think it's a topic that people are interested in and want to know more about, but they don't always know where to go or what questions they can ask. And, you know, this is the forum for this show is just a really nice setting for people to be able to come in and learn and ask questions that they might have. And it's always been a really safe environment for people to ask those questions. So, yeah.
Yeah. I find that, too, a lot of people just still have a lot of the stereotypes that society has between, movies, our own history, and just sort of this conglomerate idea of what Wicca is.
Exactly.
I've worked really hard within my own community, actually, to do a lot of lifting of the veil, so to speak, on a faith, a religion that is really not as different from many others as they think.
Exactly.
So I've had a lot of success, actually, in my own community here. So I feel very blessed that I've been able to do that. And it's worked out really well. So I'm open to any question. Obviously, one of the things that makes Wicca very special is the fact that it can be a very personal path. So what one person does or believes is not always exactly the same as another. We don't really have this book that says, you have to do things this way, and this way.
Right.
So it leaves a lot of room for personal interpretation and what really speaks to you, which is what makes it, to me, makes it personal and makes it very freeing.
Absolutely. So for anybody who is new to Wicca or isn't really sure what it is, and I know this is a tough question to wrap up, but can you give us kind of a description of what is Wicca? What does it contain? What is the overall viewpoint?
Yeah.
It's a tough question, I know.
Yeah, it's a big answer, actually. Wicca is a fairly new term. You have to understand the term Wicca really isn't probably even 100 years old, to be honest with you. It was developed from when back in the 60s is really when a lot of this took hold. And it's derived off of some older English definitions, but basically Wicca, in sort of a nutshell, is a earth-based religion that believes in the vitality of everything that's around us. Everything has a spirit. Everything has a connection, and we honor a balance of God and Goddess. It's not just male-dominated. We understand that it takes male and female to create that balance. Wicca nowadays it has so many different branches. Wicca is like a big umbrella now, and you have all these different little offshoots that are kind of underneath it. If you think of like Christianity being an umbrella, and you have, all the different little offshoots of Christianity, Wicca is sort of the same way. So, but basically, it's earth-based, understanding the sacredness to life in everything that's around us and how it connects to everything with us. Right. That's sort of the real meat of it. There's a lot of history as far as depending on how far back you want to go, but I believe Gardner is sort of, when he brought it over from Europe, and he really brought it to the forefront back in the 60s, late 50s, 60s, that's where it really started to take hold. Your freedom movement of the 60s. And we had a lot of our what I would call Wiccan or pagan individuals that have really stood out in society, that have made headlines and really done a lot of work for society. Right. They've been doing this since the 60s. These people have put a lot of hard work into it, and Absolutely. They're sort of the staples. Yeah, they're the staples of our community. So they've done a lot of good work for it.
So how did you personally get involved in all of this? Or how did you just figure out that this was the correct path for you?
Well, for me personally, it was, we had a young family, and we were dealing with a church. We were doing the, what you feel like you're supposed to do in a small community. You join the church, everybody gets baptized. My husband was a layman in the church. We were on the board. I taught Sunday school. I taught youth group. And I got to a point actually with the youth group, believe it or not, where there were certain lessons coming up that I had questions on, that I was taking to the minister at that particular point in time and asking questions and saying, okay, this doesn't sound right. How am I supposed to teach something that doesn't feel right even to me? And all I got was, well, it's in the book, and this is the way it's written, so this is the way we have to teach it. And that didn't sit well with me. Right. And then having a few other issues with the church itself, we decided to step back and take a break. And that's when I really started listening to the voices that I felt were calling me. And I started doing some research on Wicca. Basically, I'm horrible at names, but I did a lot of book reading, believe it or not. And I started reading about this stuff going, oh my gosh, there's a name for all this stuff
Right.
that I had questions on and had stuff going on, and they've wrapped it up into this term called Wicca. So I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. And that's really how I got started.
I think, yeah. And I think that's see, I don't know where I fall. And I know we've had this conversation before. I don't know where I fall. I have a little bit of from a bunch of different things, but that's kind of what you were just describing is exactly where I was at because I was raised Lutheran, and it's when I started looking at other things and going, oh, other people do this, other people think this, other people feel this way too, and it started to make sense,
Yeah.
It was amazing. So we're starting to get some questions in chat, which is great. I'm seeing them, guys. I want to ask her one more question before we get to those. So when I introduced you as a high priestess. Can you kind of explain what that means to people?
Well, in my position as a high priestess, it means that I actually was initiated into a coven and went through the teachings and the different levels that were necessary for that coven for me to become a high priestess. A high priestess meant that I had certain responsibilities when it came to teaching, when it came to leading. I do have my ordainedship with the state of Iowa. So I understand, though, that there are people that have not necessarily had that opportunity to be involved in a coven and have that type of learning. So they do a lot of stuff on their own, or they take classes, they go through different, seminary. There are pagan seminary schools out there. So for me, my high priestess rank comes from a coven where I learned the different rituals and steps needed to lead, counsel, and help my pagan community. And that, I believe, I was with my coven for about 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
So, it's a step process. It's kind of like going through college, and you enter as a freshman, and you go through different lessons and learning to finally get that the graduation point, I guess, so to speak. Although,
right.
One of the things I have learned about paganism, Wicca, my faith, is that learning takes many lifetimes. So I'm never going to be done.
Right. No, and absolutely. That's always true. And I guess you just said something that I do want to address before we get to the rest of the questions, because as I was learning about Wicca and paganism, I see a lot of the similarities in that. I see some differences, and I'm by no means am I an expert on any of this, but I still get confused where the difference comes from. So is that something you'd be able to talk to, just kind of how Wicca is different from paganism? Or is it not?
Well, the way I look at it, and this is me personally, paganism is actually defined as someone who believes in a polytheism religion. So in other words, you believe in more than one deity. That's basically what they consider paganism now. In ancient times, the word pagan simply meant you were a country person. You weren't as sophisticated as those who lived in the city. So paganism is that even bigger umbrella that Wicca is underneath, if that makes sense. You have paganism in the fact that technically if you, if you're a shaman, if you study voodoo or Vodun or Native American different paths, those are all in the definition term pagan, because they believe in more than one deity. So Wicca is just a form of paganism. That's
kind
the way
of
I
like
look at it.
Kind of like Lutheran would be a form of Christianity.
Of course. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Exactly.
That makes sense. All right. So to get to a couple questions from chat, Darren was wondering, what was your worst fear when starting to learn about and or working with Wiccan rituals and just the religion?
I think my worst fear was one that's probably pretty common, and that's, what is everybody else going to think or say?
Right.
I knew in my heart it made sense, and I was accepting of it. But it was, okay, how am I going to explain this to everybody when all they've seen is what's on TV, or watched The Craft or, whatever. And one of my biggest stepping stones was talking to my parents. I was very fortunate that when I approached my parents, who were not, exceptionally religious, but my parents' biggest fear was the problems my children might face,
right?
The prejudice that they might face, and we were just extremely blessed that, and I will let anybody know that the minute you tell your children you're pagan, you're done. You're out of the closet. There's just no keeping it in after that. I'm sorry. I found that out. There's no, oh, well, mommy does this, but don't tell anybody. Yeah, that doesn't work.
Yep.
So basically, I decided to take I decided to take an attitude of, you know what, there is nothing wrong with this. There is nothing to be hidden in the shadows.
Right.
We are advanced enough that we need to help people understand that just because it's different doesn't mean it's bad.
Correct.
So, and you're not to say you're not still going to have those people that are going to have their blinders on and they're going to say, no, this is not right. And, I look at it this way. I try to say those people that say they're worried about me, they're worried about my soul or whatever.
Right.
Okay, you're coming out of a place of love. You're worried about me. I don't feel the same way as you, and I just simply ask them to respect my position. If they can't respect my position, then I just take a step back from them. I don't really try to do too much engaging because it really doesn't prove anything. Sometimes they're just out to look for a fight, And
I think that's the best we can do is just say, I respect that you disagree with me, and you're free to have your opinions. And back off then,
Yeah.
It's, if I've learned nothing throughout the paths and the things that I do, is I am not going to convince anybody of anything. So I'm done trying. But and I'm not saying that in a bad way. It's just it's fine. If you want to believe this or that, that's perfectly fine. But then allow me to do the same. So.
But one of the things I have learned is that, the image that you project, and it seems bad to say that, but it's true that people's first impression of you is the one that sticks.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm in a unique position that I work in a professional field, my mundane job. And I'm also very, very fortunate that I am asked to come into my local high school, and I speak about 2 to 3 times a year for their world religions class on Wicca. And, I always come in, I'm usually coming in off of work or whatever. So when you present a confident image, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, of, look, this is who I am. You can either accept it, and I am more than happy to educate you on what I believe, without being pushy or prejudiced.
Right.
You know,
no,
and that's
I get
one
exactly
of my big
what
things.
you're saying. Yep.
I let people know that, look, this is simply my opinion. This is my personal path. This is not a path you have to choose. This is not a path I'm asking anybody else to choose. And I believe that's a big difference between Wicca and Christianity. You have Christianity that teaches their way is the only way. Right. And that if you don't follow that, you know, you have all this bad stuff that's going to happen to you.
Right.
Naturally, someone who follows that path has a hard time opening up and accepting somebody that's on a different faith.
Right.
And the great thing about Wicca is it's so open-ended, it's so accepting, that honestly, in its true form, to me, is more about love than any other faith. In my opinion.
Yeah. And for the most part, that's what I've experienced too. I mean, I think you're going to get the people in any religion that is very believe like us, act like us, or you can't be part of us. But yeah, it's most definitely a very accepting lifestyle. So, and I love the fact that the high school brings you in to talk about that. I think that's so important to not just teach them the world religions. You know, this is a world religion, but it's an our world religion. So it's so important to help educate people about that, you know?
Right. Yeah.
You've touched on this a little bit, but what would you say is the most common misperceptions about Wicca?
Some of the common misconceptions are obviously the whole devil thing, Satan, and a lot of that comes from you have between history that's been written with a shade of prejudice, and obviously our own cinemas, Hollywood. Obviously, witchcraft is not as much fun if you can't wiggle your nose and have something happen, or, you know, chant something by candlelight and have all this really cool stuff go on. But it's a lot of it is that I've run into just not being, gosh, and this is an answer that could take forever, but the whole thing is misstrued, and that's because it's been in the shadows for so long. It's been this mysterious, faith. And then there's this, and I was just reading, it looks like Pat put on a quick question, and I have to agree with her. She asked about a difference between witchcraft and Wicca, and a lot of it is they can be very blended together. So people don't understand that there is a difference between Wicca and being a witch. They're not necessarily the same, but a lot of people incorporate it. A lot of people incorporate it as being the same. So the minute you tell someone you're Wiccan, they go, "Oh, you're a witch." I was like, well, you know.
Well, and why does that instantly have to be a bad thing? You know, I mean, it just because you maybe take the title of witch doesn't mean that you're negative and full of warts. It just means, in my opinion, it simply means that you are able to interpret and potentially interact with energy. So if that's the case, then I'm a witch, you know?
Yeah. Well, obviously this stems back hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And it all has to do with a lot of history with the Catholic Church, politics, and not just worldwide politics, but even small town politics. Right. It was very easy when, centuries ago, every village had that one person, be it male or female, that interacted with the gods for them, that blessed the fields for them, that helped birth the babies, helped people pass over the veil when they died, did all the rites But as history shows, and as we progressed as a society, the more government got involved and larger religions that came in, it pushed that individual out and they basically turned them into the bad guy. Mm-hmm. Said, look, we're the ones that are going to do this for you. This person actually is doing more harm than good. And that person was the wise one of the village, and that's basically where the word witch comes from. Witch was the wise person. The definition got lost. I think it is slowly but surely starting to come back. But it's going to take some time. And obviously, I've seen a couple of other questions that, obviously you have your individuals that are very, what's the word I want to say?
Opinionated?
Well, opinionated is a good word. Militant. I think there are some people that don't realize their ego is getting in the way. Mm-hmm. They've learned a way. It's worked for them. So they have decided that, well, if you don't do it this way, it's not going to work. Therefore, you're doing it wrong.
So that always makes me think. Did you ever see that meme that was bouncing around Facebook that it's like, getting ready to do a ritual, grab the candles, grab the incense, grab the sage, grab the this, and then there's the other witches dusting the Cheeto dust off their fingers saying, all right, bitches, let's do this. I'm so the second one. I'm like, are we going to do this or not? Come on.
Yeah. That's totally me. I'm the one walking around banging a pot going, all right, get the F out of here, man. This is my house. I don't need you here.
Do not make me come back in that room.
Exactly. But, I think it also depends on, everybody's a little different. Everybody connects to it differently. There are some people that work really well with what we call ritual magic. They work, that's how they get into that position. It's the changing the wardrobe. It's having the candles and the incense and the tools and everything. And then there are those that work just fine, keeping it simple. Right. When I first started learning, I loved using the tools. I loved having the wrote out intricate rituals, the candles. And there are times that, depending on what I'm doing, I still love to do that. But honestly, 9 times out of 10 now, I'm very comfortable with my relationship with the goddess and the god and the elements that I really don't feel like I need to go through all that all the time. So I think it's everybody's own personal way of how they connect. And right. I don't think any one way is wrong or right. It's got to be very individualized.
And it's really, like I've talked about on this show so many times, if it makes you feel better, if it means something to you to light those candles or to burn that incense, then by all means, go ahead and do it. If carrying that rock makes you feel safe, then carry that rock. If wearing that cross makes you feel safe, then wear that cross. It's what do you feel you need to do? For me, I know the times that I do bust out the candles or anything like that, it's more to get my mind ready for it. Because if for whatever reason it helps my mind start to focus on what I'm trying to do more. And so it's almost like prep time for me. But so you've talked about rituals a little bit here and there, and I think it's a fascinating topic. It's something that I would like to know more about myself. And actually, we're going to learn more, just a little shameless plug, December 9th. Is it the 9th?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. December 9th is my next intuitive journey class that I host here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. And Shannon is actually going to be my guest for that in-person class as well. So she's going to come out. She's going to, again, teach everybody a little bit about Wicca. But one of the things we're going to do as well is actually do a ritual during that class, so everybody gets an opportunity to see it and or participate in it. So super excited about that. If you're interested, check it out on Facebook or message me and I can get you some information. So, but can you tell people a little bit about what the rituals really are? Because I think, again, that misperception, people who don't know may really believe that you're out there sacrificing chickens and worshiping the devil. So,
yeah.
So what does a typical ritual, if you were going to do all out, tell me, okay, let me ask this. Sorry, I'm bouncing all over. Sorry. Tell me how you do a super simple ritual just for something you're doing, and then kind of if you're going to do a more formal one, what's involved in both?
Okay. Well, let's see. Okay. So I'm just going to take full moon, for example, because that's something most Wiccans will celebrate is full moon.
Love it.
Right. So if I'm doing something fairly formal, I will get into what I call my ritual robe. I will get into a specific robe that I have that I only wear for rituals. And I always kind of correlate it with the kids, like when you go to church on Sunday, you have Sunday clothes. You have clothes that you wear to church. You don't go to church in your pajamas. You get dressed and you have a special outfit you wear to church. Same thing. Gets you kind of in that mode. So I will put on my ritual robe. I have cords that I wear that symbolize the different levels that I have gone through to reach High Priestess. And then I gather my materials as far as my candles, my altar. I make sure I have my pentacle ready and my athame. I will usually use a besom to sweep my area to make sure everything's nice and clean, make sure the energy is good. I cast my circle. I always usually cast this 3 times. I use all 5 elements. So the first time I will use usually earth and water. So I'll use maybe a salt water. And then my second time I'll use fire and air. So I'll use incense. And then the third time I go around, I use spirit, which means I'm using my own energy to finish creating the circle. So I'm creating sacred space. In a way, I'm creating my church that I'm going to worship in when I celebrate my full moon. Once I'm in, I will call the elements. I will invite the goddess to come into my circle. And then at that point, if there's anything I needed to work on for full moon, if I had a spell I wanted to do, maybe I just had a special wish I wanted to do, that's the point in time. Anything I wanted to have manifest, I would do in my circle. A formal circle will usually then afterwards come down with usually what we call a cakes and wine. And what this is it's a grounding item. It allows us to sort of come back to earth. And in my experience, in my coven, one of the things I always loved is when we shared cakes and wine, that was the time we counted our blessings. We said what we were thankful for. Sometimes we'd laugh, sometimes we'd cry. It just depended on what was going on. And once that was done, we would thank the Lord and the Lady and dismiss them, and then we would dismiss the elements, open the circle, and everybody was free to go their own way. That's kind of a more formal circle. If it's just me, myself, and I have a tendency to still do my circle. I'll still get into my ritual robe. A lot of times, though, the only thing I'm in there with is a candle, and I meditate on it, or I talk to the goddess, just her and me, when I'm in circle. A lot of the times, when it comes to honoring your faith and Wicca, the changing of the seasons, the changing of the moon cycles, even the sun, just understanding the movements and recognizing those in your life makes a big difference. So ritual itself can be as simple as it needs to be, or it can be extravagant as you want it to be. For a lot of people, they really enjoy, especially if you have a large group, which is one of the things we'll do, obviously, when I'm there. On the 9th, we'll have a little bit more formal ritual. I will explain what I'm doing as we go.
Okay.
And one of the things that people need to remember, though, is that I'm doing this as I was taught through my path as what works for me. So the type of circle that I'm going to create, the type of ritual I'm going to do may be different from someone who studied maybe an Egyptian path or a Celtic path, something like that. So there's a few things that are pretty much the same in every ritual, but as long as everybody understands there are differences. So if they come to one of my rituals, as long as they understand that when they come to one of my rituals, it may not be the same as a ritual that maybe one of their friends put on. It doesn't mean that mine or their friends are better or worse. It's just different. That's all. It's just a different way of connecting.
It's your personal truth. It's your personal path. And I say that all the time when I'm just explaining something to people, or if someone asks me my opinion, I say, this is my personal truth, and it may resonate with you. It may not. And that's okay. So,
exactly.
So Darren had asked a really good question about rituals. And I guess I never thought to ask this, but it's a great question. What happens if, I guess I'll add a 2-part question to this. Can you do a ritual wrong? And what happens if you do? What's the effects?
I do think there's you do have to have a certain attitude going into ritual, a certain mindset. If you go into ritual with a nonchalant, kind of flippant attitude, understand the gods are not going to take you seriously. Nothing you do is going to take you seriously. And there is a chance of angering, disrespectful. You definitely don't want to be disrespectful. So if you walk into a circle and don't have your ducks in a row, so to speak, don't at least have some sort of an idea of what you want to do, an outline of what you want to do, it is possible, I feel, to disrespect the God. It would be no different than going into church and your minister showed up drunk and the whole thing ended up being,
Exactly. Or you just go in and you make a big joke or mockery of whatever it is that you're doing.
Exactly. Right. So I think the idea is when you go into ritual, know what you're doing, know what you're going in for. You have an idea of what you want to do or what you want to achieve. But I also believe that it's not that they don't want us to laugh and they don't want us to love, but being disrespectful, in my opinion, is not a good way to perform a successful ritual.
Right. So what about... go ahead, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, Mama Pat asked a question that kind of goes right along with what we were talking about here. She'd said, wouldn't it be if you go in with a self-serving agenda or with intent to manipulate someone against their will, then the effects of the ritual would not work? And that brings up the question of, and I've always heard this when I started, learning about doing readings for people or doing healing work or energy work of any type. You can't mess with a person's energy and try to help them make up their mind a certain direction. Or you can't, you should never go in and say, we're going to do this ritual so so-and-so breaks up with so-and-so, Right. What are your thoughts on that sort of thing? Or worse than that, even to go in and say, I wish they'd get hit by a car. I don't know. Some people are horrible people. So what happens if you're heading into this with a bad way or trying to manipulate somebody else's opinions or direction?
Well, one of the things with Wicca is its belief in the rule of three, which basically whatever you give out, you will return back to you in a power of three. And they have the Wiccan read, do as you will, being it harm none. When you have someone that goes into it with an idea of, well, I'm doing this for your own good. No, you're doing this for your ego. So what I tell people is that understand there's Wicca and then there's witchcraft. When you start doing spell work that says, I'm going to change how you're thinking, I'm going to, you have to understand that that's where that line is drawn.
Right.
And if you go into it with the idea of changing someone, you're technically going against the Wiccan read. So, for example, if someone comes to me and says, hey, so-and-so is threatening me, or I'm feeling like so-and-so is ganging up on me, I want you to do something about it. I need something to make them stop.
Right.
There's two ways to go about it. You can either do a spell that changes the other person, or you can do a spell that protects the person that needs protecting.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean you're changing the other person. You're protecting the person that wants protecting. That's
Exactly.
where that difference comes in. Understand that if you make the other decision, karma's going to come back. I've seen it happen. And, when people walk around going, well, I just don't understand why my life is this way. It's like, well, okay, what have you been putting out? What kind of emotions, what kind of feelings have you been putting out there? Because karma's coming back, and let me tell you, not to cuss, but she's a bitch.
Yeah.
She will come and get you. So, when I teach people, especially when you've got that division between Wicca, following the rule of three and the Wiccan read, and then you start going into spell work, if you want to follow Wicca and the rule of three and the Wiccan read, you've got to be careful with your spell work.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Another great question from Darren that he just took away, but I'm going to ask it anyways, Darren. When you're getting ready to do a ritual or deal with a situation that someone has come in and asked you to help with, what sort of things do you do to prepare yourself, or what sort of protection do you put in place to keep yourself safe?
Well, one of the things I do is, first of all, I make sure my chakras are aligned. I make sure that I myself am healthy, bodily and mentally. So I make sure I don't, I'm not down with the flu or something like that.
Yep.
And mentally, I make sure that I have just meditated on it and aligned my chakras. Once I go into it, I'm also a big believer in I ask as many questions as I possibly can. I try to pick up as many vibes as I can on what's going on. So basically, because a lot of times people, they know what they want, but they have a really hard time spitting it out, you know what I mean? Formulating it in a way that works. So I try to help work them through that. But there's a lot of different, things that you can do to prepare yourself, but two of the biggest ones are make sure you're physically healthy and make sure you're mentally healthy before you go and help someone. If you've been going through a stressful time because of maybe a family death or something you're dealing with personally, it's very hard to give someone else of yourself when you're empty, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Makes sense.
Right. So, and being very honest with people. I have had people want me to come and do, just for example, maybe like a house cleansing, okay? I say, okay, I do my thing and I come over there and I take one look at this place and I say, okay, look, I'll tell you right now, I can do a cleansing, but unless you change things here and clean up this mess, it's going to be right back where it was in a month.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
Sometimes you have to be brutally honest with people.
Oh, yeah. And that can go well or poorly.
Right. And so I can be fairly brutally honest with people. So I let them know if they want my help, I'm more than willing to help. But here's what they need to do for their part of it. If they're not willing to fulfill that, then it's not going to work.
Absolutely. So kind of on that same note, and again, this is a two-part question. Do you ever go out like on paranormal investigations? Do you ever get asked to be a part of that? And what led to that is Mama Pat was asking, do you believe in evil spirits? And is there something that as a Wiccan they can do when there are evil spirits present?
I've been on very, very few. Some of the house cleansings I've done, there have been, I guess I don't like to say evil. I like to say maybe, angry or confused or maybe malevolent. I don't even know if that's the right word, but,
cranky and asshole is usually where we go.
Yeah. I haven't been on too many team things. I've done a lot of just my own kind of things. But one of the things I have found is, again, making sure you're physically well, making sure you're mentally well, understanding your chakra system, and being able to seal that off so that you're not absorbing or attracting stuff that you may end up taking home with you. One of the very simple things that I do to protect myself is, and some people may think it's gross, but basically you can stick your finger in your mouth, like lick your finger, okay? Your saliva, your bodily fluids, believe it or not, have a lot of great energy. So you stick your finger in your mouth, you lick your finger, and then on your third eye, you form the pentacle, and you invoke earth. That's a great way to protect your third eye, especially as a Wiccan or somebody who's very sensitive to, now I'm sorry, did I just make you laugh?
Yeah, I've never thought of that before, but
yeah,
okay.
It's very simple. It's very effective because when you're going into a situation like that, I mean, you are exposing yourself. You're exposing your third eye to a lot of that crap.
I have so decided going forward, when I'm walking into an investigation and somebody's getting uncomfortable, I'm just going to go up and lick their foreheads. Oh, my God. I protected you. Just trust me. Yeah.
Hey, one of the things I have learned is, you know what? You make do with what you have, and if all you have is your spit, that's what you use.
That's what you use. So I sorry.
Right.
I did not mean to interrupt. I just had this visual of me walking up and licking somebody's forehead, and I lost it. Oh, okay.
Well,
sorry.
I will let you know, too, another way to do it is if you have like a vial of oil or holy water, you can do that for other people versus
that's
them
not
kind of
nearly as
cringing
much
and going,
fun.
Oh, I know, versus them cringing and going, ew, you're spitting on me. That's gross. But
that's nowhere near as much fun. And think of the reaction we're going to get.
Yeah.
All right.
But and that another thing is I do enough other holistic work that what's also really important is when you're done is bathing. Cold water, running cold water over your hands all the way up to your elbows for a few minutes. When you're showering afterwards, making sure you're doing a visual of removing anything kind of sticking to you. That's always a good way to do it too.
Right. No, that's awesome. That's one I hadn't thought of before, but it's definitely going to stick with me going forward. So
yeah,
and like you said, it's something that's so simple. If I'm in a situation where I feel like I need that little extra bit, I can do that anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so weird question for you. well, and I'm sure you get it, but there's this, I know for Wicca, and I always get this screwed up, the pentacle is used, right? But it gets confused with the pentagram. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes. Pentacle will be the 5-sided star inside the circle. So you're basically doing the 5 elements contained, which is the circle. And then the pentacle is without the circle. Basically, they're not withheld in the circle.
But oftentimes that is being confused with a satanic symbol.
Yeah. And where you get that is when it's turned upside down, where spirit is turned upside down. It's no longer at the top, it's at the bottom. And so that's... Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that's where kind of what I was trying to get at with this, because my understanding of it was the 5 points of the star are earth, wind, water, fire, and then the top point of the star is spirit, and it's all encompassing. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
So, but if it's upside down with the point down,
it's still a pentacle.
It's just that's what typically people will then associate with Satanism.
They do because if and I don't know if anybody on your show has ever studied it. I've done just a teeny bit into it. Satanism, as it stands, basically is a belief in it takes faith and turns it on its head, and that's sort of the idea of having that upside down pentacle. It takes spirit and turns it within. So instead of honoring an outside God, they honor the self. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So they, how they came up with, Satan, obviously, to go.
Who knows?
Technically, only the Christian faith believes in Satan. To be honest with you, they're the only faith that believes in Satan. So, but those who practice Satanism, as I understand, it's a belief of the self. And so the upside-down pentacle, as we use it, is basically taking spirit and turning it upside down. It is also a symbol for chaos. In the way I understand it, if I remember my history, in a lot of groups or covens, when someone went through certain series of their initiation, they were required to wear their pentacle upside down because it meant that they were going through a time of chaos. They were going through a time of self-reflection and trying to understand why they were on this path. Obviously, they don't do that anymore because that would totally send the wrong message. But that's really all that means is kind of turning it on its head. But because of the viewpoint of the public and the Christian church and everything, and obviously sensationalism on media, a lot of people just assume that when you've got a pentacle turned upside down and you put the picture of Baphomet in there, oh my gosh, they're worshiping the devil.
Right.
But
and I brought that up on purpose to help make people understand that just because you see the star in a circle doesn't mean that it's satanic. By most of the time when I see it, it has nothing to do with that,
Right.
So didn't mean to put you on the spot about talking about Satanism because I know neither one of us know a ton about it, but it's just a misperception.
Yeah, that actually comes up a lot in the high school class that I help teach in and I take in my pentacle. I have a beautiful wooden and copper pentacle that was made for me by a dear friend, and we use it as a symbolism. I say, okay, now when you turn it this way, this is the witch's shield. This is our shield. It's a symbol of our faith and our protection, just like a Christian wears a cross.
Right.
But then I'll turn it upside down and I'll say, okay, now this is a whole nother conversation.
Right.
And so I definitely bring it up because of that, to let them understand that there is a big difference between Satanism and Wicca. They're so totally different ends of the spectrum.
They're so opposite.
Very opposite. But one of the things I also ask them to do is when I show them my pentacle, which is the 5-pointed star, right side up with the circle, I say, okay, now take a look at this symbol and think to yourself, what else has this symbol?
Mm-hmm.
And, I kind of get the deer in the headlight looks. And I say, okay, think of a sheriff's star.
Mm-hmm.
The police department, it's a 5-pointed star with a circle.
Absolutely.
You drive into a small town and you see all of these different clubs, on a board, and a lot of them have a 5-pointed star on it. And I say, okay, so out of all the symbols in the world that they could have chosen, why would they choose this? Because it means protection.
Right.
That's its ancient symbolism, is simply protection.
And I love that.
It just kind of lets them go, oh, yeah, okay. It's opening their eyes to realizing that this kind of stuff is not just in a box. You have to look outside of that.
Right. How do you feel the classes are typically received when you go out to talk to like a classroom, or if you teach any classes or like when you come in for the class next month? How do you typically feel the messages are received? Do you feel like you're able to clear up those misconceptions?
I feel like I can. Yeah. You're always going to have the individual that's going to look at you like, you're nuts, and I know what I know, and what you know is crazy. But I look at it this way: if as long as they're respectful in the class, or if they have a question, I answer it as honestly as I possibly can.
Sure.
And I also let them know, hey, this is just my opinion. You could ask 100 other people there that say they're Wiccan, and you may get 100 different answers.
Right.
But
absolutely.
It doesn't mean
truth.
any of them are right. It doesn't mean that any of them are necessarily wrong.
Right.
So, it gets to be hard to generalize Wicca, to be honest with you, because of that personalization.
I'm not getting to all the questions, guys. We're running out of time, and I want to make sure to ask a couple more things over here. But do you feel that conjuring is the same or different than Wicca?
Conjuring as far as, like, talking to the Lord and the Lady, like the God and the Goddess and the elements, or conjuring as in a different entity?
Rebecca, you can elaborate on your question. I'm going to guess what you're asking. I would guess she might be asking, as, we're saying we're calling in the elements, we're calling in the spirits. I could see how that could be seen as conjuring.
Okay.
So, but maybe that's what she's asking is, if I go out into a haunted location and I conjure a spirit, how is that different from what Wicca is doing when they go out and conjure in New Orleans? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So basically, you're creating a relationship and speaking with another entity. I don't know. I suppose that could be argued with as far as,
sure.
Again, that fine line between witchcraft and
sure.
Wicca. I know Wiccans that don't like to be called witches, and I know witches that don't like to be called Wiccan. So,
right.
But the word conjure means to bring into a presence. So I guess it would be the same as calling on the Lord and the Lady. But I guess when I think of the word conjure, I think of a like you said, going into a house and trying to
right
get something to make its presence known or something like that.
Sure.
But I suppose that would be fairly similar. You're basically speaking out. You're speaking out. You're making a connection. You're opening yourself psychically to communicate with another entity. So in definition, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah. That was an interesting question, and we can maybe get more from her later and make sure that we were trying to understand her question. But
Sure.
we're at an hour mark, but I want to ask just a couple more things. So if someone wants to learn more about Wicca or a more earth-based religion, if they want to just kind of start learning more or start even trying to follow this path, how would you suggest somebody does that? What's the best first steps?
Well, my suggestion would be reading. Like I said, I'm horrible with names, so I'm literally walking upstairs here to my workroom. I have bookshelves upon bookshelves. There are a lot of really good authors out there that have done books. You have the biggest one would be Cunningham. He's obviously he's no longer with us, but his books are some of the first that I read, and I love them because they're so down to earth. They just bring everything in layman's terms. You have Raven Grimassi, another wonderful author that is a beautiful storyteller on top of it. So his books are always very engaging, and they cover a plethora of different things. I have everything from Monroe to Starhawk. To me, the first thing they can do, if they can read and do a collection of different books, from there, reach out to their local community to find out if there's a group that gets together. Maybe a local UU church that has a cups group. With the computers we have now, it's pretty easy to look into any type of pagan community that might be in their area.
Yep.
Meet maybe, once a month at a coffee house or something. And one of the things I learned, too, is that once they're really serious about studying, about learning, their teacher will come. That's just the way the universe works. The way it worked for me.
Yeah, I think that's very, very true.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you got to do a little bit of your own legwork.
and you have to. And I guess the other thing, I was trying to figure out how to say it, but basically it is your own legwork, but it's also, like Shannon has said so many times throughout the show, guys, Wicca, like any other religion or any other belief system or paranormal investigating or whatever it is, you have to find your truth. You have to find what feels right to you. And just because you find a book on Wicca that says this is what it is and this is what it's not, if that doesn't feel 100% right to you, don't forget that you still have that free will to, well, this makes sense and I agree with this, but this is not 100%. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And that's where I've always said, I mean, people ask me all the time, well, what is my religion? I don't know. I really don't. Mm-hmm. If I had to say where I fall, I'm probably close to pagan Wiccan. But I'm not 100%. I'm not. And so I'm very eclectic about what I believe, and that's okay. So
yeah.
Yeah,
I have several friends. I have several friends that are that way too. I studied a certain path for several years, and now that I have sort of, I've expanded on that. I've taken those grassroots that I've learned, not just my pagan background, but also my Christian background. And I've sort of melded that, and I've just kept looking and I've kept learning. When you go out there, I will say that for those of you that are looking and learning, understand there's a lot of information out there, and it can be hard to sift through a lot of stuff. There's a lot of Wicca 101, so to say, books out there. So don't get disgruntled if you get a few and it doesn't seem right. Keep looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because eventually, but you do have to do your homework. I would say definitely invest in a good notebook and pencil set and get ready to take a lot of notes, to do a lot of journaling, and start working on that book of ways, because that makes all the difference.
Yeah, definitely. And Shannon won't say it, but I mean, I'll plug the importance of having somebody who's experienced this path, who has knowledge about the subject and has had their own personal experiences, belief, and has been tested and tried. And, like I said at the beginning of the show, Shannon is someone that I respect very much. And I've asked her a lot of questions over the years. And if I have questions, she's going to be one of the first people that I think of. So having that resource, reading books, checking the internet, doing all that, that's great. But if you can find someone to talk to as well, that's huge. So you can have that first world experiences too. I just think that's huge. So anyways.
Yeah.
So we've been on the radio, the show. I always say the radio. It's not technically the radio. So we're getting over an hour. What I typically do, like I explained before we went on air, is I do just a real quick 1-card general reading for everybody. I don't know if you would feel the need to put a little insight on that too, or what tools you'd want to do that, but you're welcome to chime in on this as well if you'd like. So while Shannon was talking, I went ahead and was shuffling my cards, and because it seemed appropriate, I am using my Wicca Oracle cards for the night. And the card that I drew is actually the Chalice card. And this is saying that the chalice is a symbol of blessing, consecration, and bliss. Whenever it is placed within, it is made sacred and transfers that sanctity to those who drink from it. The blessed waters flow forth endlessly, symbolizing the wellspring of divine love. In ritual and magic, its primary elemental energy is water, and its direction is the sacred circle. In the sacred circle is west. The meaning of this card is: drink deep from the vessel of life and love. Feel yourself connected to the waters of the world, one in harmonious union with all beings. You are offered a chance to seek your bliss and answer the call. I think that this card was so important to pull tonight, because a lot of the reason, like I said, guys, that I wanted to have this show and bring Shannon on was to help bring people together and to understand that there's truly is not that big of a difference between people and our beliefs and how we look at things. We may put different titles on things sometimes, but that doesn't mean that we're looking at things different. I know you guys have heard me say this before, but we do panels at our psychic and paranormal expos that Mama Pat and I host. And one of my favorite ones that we ever did had the most eclectic group of people up there, because we had a Roman Catholic, and we had a pagan, and we had an atheist, and we had me, who God knows what I believe. And I mean, it was just such a difference of belief systems and religions, a difference in religions, but yet when we were answering the questions from the audience, we were primarily saying all the same things. Different titles on occasion, but most of the time saying the same things. And so that is a lot of the reason that I wanted to have this show tonight and bring you on, Shannon, is to help people understand that this isn't something to be scared of, and this isn't something that's so very different from the way that we live our lives day to day. And because I love you and I want it to, so there was a selfish side of this. I wanted to be able to talk to you for a while. So, but it's so important to remember that we're all in this together, guys. And, rather than judge and scream and yell and tell people what they should believe, have conversations like we're having tonight. Ask the questions like we're having tonight. a lot of times what you're going to find out is that people are more than willing to tell you what they believe in a calm way. And then if you don't agree, it's perfectly fine to say, I understand that's what you believe, and walk away. So, Shannon, do you have anything you want to put on that?
I guess I will just add that if you drew the chalice, that's actually really awesome. That is also a symbol of the feminism and the womb and the goddess. So it's a symbol of learning. And so what an awesome card to pull for tonight, really. And one of the things I let people know is, understand that, life is a wheel, and we're all trying to get to the middle. We just use different spokes to get there.
Absolutely.
So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
So if anybody's interested in keeping up with you or connecting with you after the show, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you or to follow you or just kind of keep up with where you're at and what you're doing?
Well, I'm on Facebook. I do have a, I guess I own a, I guess I wouldn't call it a company, but I run a business called Lunar Eclipse. So they can find me on Facebook under Lunar Eclipse, or they can feel free to look for me as Shannon Webber under Facebook as well. But I do have a lot of people that, get in touch with me through my Lunar Eclipse business when it comes to my pastoral business. So either way works great. I'm not against teaching, if somebody's interested in learning. So
yeah, absolutely. And if you follow her, you might just see some belly dancing pictures, which is really cool. And we didn't even talk about that, but she's phenomenal, and she's awesome, and she's beautiful, and it's so much fun. It's so much fun. So anyways.
You wouldn't know it looking at my Facebook picture. My Facebook picture of my big fat cat.
Yeah, that's all right. Sorry. Okay. So, I think that's everything. Guys, I know there were some questions that were asked in chat, and we just kind of ran out of time for everything, but I think there's more that we could definitely discuss about this and more questions. So, I may have Shannon back on sometime. But if you are in the area and you get a chance, December 9th again is the Intuitive Journey class. It's going to be here in Cedar Rapids, and we'll be having Shannon as our guest for that class. She will be, again, sharing information, answering questions, and we'll be doing a ritual that night. So I am very, very excited for that. It's going to be fun.
Me too.
And remind me, Shannon, to talk to you between then and now, because I know we talked about the whole snack and drinks thing. So we'll just figure out what we're doing so I can make sure I can help. So, but my memory sucks, so I'm reminding you to help me remember.
I will try.
Between the two of us, hopefully we can remember. So
yes.
All right, guys. So coming up for me in the future here, I just wanted to let everybody know I am going to be taking the month of December off. For all of you wonderful people who have been following me, you guys know that I have been running nonstop since about April and have had something going on every weekend. And it's just been super busy during the week as well. So I'm going to go ahead and take the advice that I give to so many other people on take a break. And I'm going to take
good for you.
Right? It's mixed emotions. It really is. There's part of me that's like, oh, but I want to keep doing them. But it's like, I could really use some downtime. So I'm going to go ahead and take the month of December off from the Realm Walker only. I will still be joining Shay on Friday nights on Shay's Paranormal Chat. So you can't get rid of me completely because I'd go into withdrawal. But we'll be coming back in January then with the Realm Walker. I'll get an announcement of guests here very soon. for when we start the show back up, but wanted to let everybody know we will be taking a small break for the month to enjoy the holidays and just kind of regroup and recoup and all that fun stuff. I do have some investigations coming up in December as well, so you'd be watching the page for some lives from those. Not 100% at liberty to say where they're at yet, because I know one of them is kind of a surprise thing, and I can't remember which one, so it's best if I just don't say. Anyways, that's what's going on with me for right now, guys. Shannon, thank you so much. This has been so much fun, and I love picking your brain. I love picking your brain. You did amazing. Like I said, there's more questions even I had, let alone questions we missed in chat. So I'd love to have you back on the show somewhere down the road. So we'll talk about that.
Like I said, it's a lifetime of learning. So it's kind of hard to shove it all into an hour.
It is. And a question like, what is Wicca? Oh, that could take hours,
Yeah. Do you have a year? Maybe I could explain
it. Maybe, but I'd have a million questions, so you'd need another year to answer questions. So, but thank you. I really do appreciate it. And, for everybody who's been in chat and is listening to this, whether it's on playback or live, just a huge thank you to you guys for tuning into this, giving us an opportunity to share this information for everybody being respectful in chat. I very much appreciate that. Darren, you're a pain in the butt. Darren's like, hey, what is Wicca? But yeah, it's been a wonderful show. Thank you guys. I will be back with the Realm Walker in January. Love you guys, and thanks so much for tuning in. Have a great night.
Great. Thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.